Okay, so hello everyone, and I am going to share my screen. Okay, that should be good. Okay, so welcome to week 7. We're almost halfway there. Yes, we're almost halfway there. So this one and then another one. Friendly reminder, assignment 3 is due tonight. I have not finished grading assignment 2. I'm almost halfway there, so I do apologize about that. But overall, I've seen excellent things. I've seen great work. Some of us have been forgetting to upload the video. I am taking point two point 2 points off, so two tenths of points off. Remember that each assignment is worth 10% of your whole grade. So that's why there's 7 assignments, so that's a 70. Then there's the class discussions, which are close to 30%. So make sure we're completing those. I am behind on, a little bit on grading, but I will catch up this week, make sure everything's graded by the end of Sunday. Okay. With that said, today we're going to start a new project. So assignment 3 was a follow-up of assignment 2. So it was assignment 2 and assignment 3 were connected. Well, from now on, we're going to work on this massive project. But don't fret, it's going to be fine. We're going to build on it. So assignment 4, assignment 5, assignment 6, and assignment 7, which are the last 3 assignments. Oh, that's a total of 4. Okay, are all related. So we're going to start off easy, and then we're going to be adding features to the app and more things until the end. The final is going to have you decide on your own features to add to the app. Okay, but that's what's coming forth. So I will talk about assignment 4 today. This is a big assignment, major assignment, and honestly, if you work on it a little bit week by week, we're building on everything, so it's not too bad. It's not too bad, okay? But you do have to keep up because there are new concepts that are going to be thrown at you. Today we're going to be working on UA fragments. Next week is going to be the recycler review, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means and all these things. So we've been working with activities. We created 2 activities when we were back in week 3 and week 4. I guess all the way to week 6, we talked about creating activities. And today we're going to introduce this new topic called fragments. And from now on, we're going to see fragments. We're going to be working with fragments all along, okay? And you'll see why. But there is, that one should be hidden. Okay, so the 7-week overview is there. We're going to do the UI fragment lecture in a little bit. Then there is a new project if you're following the book. I believe this is like chapter 8 or 9. It's on the criminal intent. Now, if you do want to get ahead of me, go for it. Move on to week 8. You do need week 8 to complete assignment 4. And that has to do with the recycler review. I will mention it slightly today, but I will focus on it next week. But it's going to be there. So criminal intent, very similar to what we're going to be doing. Or actually, assignment 4 is very similar to criminal intent because criminal intent was there first. But criminal intent, it comes strictly or straight from the book. Okay. And then there's week 7 discussions. Any questions? No? Okay, no questions. I will move on. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about Android developer. So I sometimes I get some questions on like Android Studio and Android itself, Kotlin. The developers of Google are changing things a lot, and I see that some of you have a different Android Studio version than me, a more updated than mine, and that's because Android Studio updates very frequently, very frequently, and I'm just gonna keep the one I have right now because it's stable, but I'm able to bring down to an older version if you have a newer one, so I still can make it work, right? But if you are ever in doubt, the book is old, the slides are old too. So if you're ever in doubt on how to program some things, you can always go into developer.android.com, and in here you're gonna find more information on what we're doing. So today I'm going to be talking about fragments, and so you will see that we will be importing a fragment to our library with the No, sorry, I'm like my word's leaving right now. My words are leaving. Okay, the Gradle. Okay, so with the Gradle. So this is where you're gonna see what packets are there and how to update that Gradle. And towards the end, again, it probably like in week 10, I will cover a little bit more on the Gradle and if things are not compatible, how to fix the compatibility, how to actually modify the TOML file and make sure everything's working fine. Okay, but that's more towards like chapter 10. As for now, if you're ever wanting to find out more on this, just go there. And the current version right now is, they will tell you when the version, so it's not long ago. So this version was released in August 2025. The one before that was like in June. So yeah, June 2025. So these are the different versions of for the fragment for this week. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. With that said, I will go ahead and start on the class lecture. All right. So we have UI fragments. Remember, UI is just user interface and then fragments. Let's talk about what a fragment is. So the goals for this module is to master concepts of UI fragment. So why do we want fragments? When do we use fragments? What is a fragment? How to use these fragments? We're going to implement the user interface fragments and understand the life cycle of fragments. So that's the goal for this week. Right? To understand these fragments, because we're going to be using for assignments. So going through the book, Criminal Intent is a list detailed app. So in here, the idea of a criminal intent is that it records the details of office crimes. So when you open the app, you should see something like this. This is the entry. So in here, you would type in like the title of whatever crime you saw. So somebody like leaving dirty dishes in the break room, walking away from an empty shared printer after documents have been printed, things like that. Okay, so that's what the purpose of this app is, to report crimes in the office. So office crimes. Okay, so what they have here is you put in the title, you put in the picture as evidence, details of when it was, when the crime was created, and then whether it was solved or not, and then to send the crime report. And then you can create all these crimes, individual crimes, and in those crimes, create a list. So you're gonna be able to see all the crimes that happened in the office, and you can create a new crime by pressing this plus button, and then whether items were solved or not. Can't remember if it was solved for the little thing or it was unsolved yet. Okay, but pretty much that's the idea of the criminal intent. Now, this is very, very similar to what we're going to be doing. We are going to we're going to create a glucose monitor where the user can go ahead and record their glucose levels 2 hours after eating. And so every day they're able to create a new entry with all the information. And then over the days, the information is going to stack here, kind of in a log. And by the end of this, they should not the end of this assignment, but towards the end of like the final, people can actually share with their doctors. They could, add things like images, put in more stuff like a map or where were they eating, pictures, anything they want. But that's the main idea. All right, so what is a fragment? A fragment is a controller object that represents a portion of the user's interface with an activity. So what is a controller object? A controller object is pretty much what is able to control. So once the user presses on something, the controller object is the one that brings to light. For example, if I press on in the previous example, right, the controller object would be able to bring the screen up. Okay, so I would press on something, and then the controller object would be able to bring the UI to the front. Okay, so it represents a portion of the user's interface within an activity. So think of it as a fragment, as a sub-activity, and this sub-activity has its own layout, its own logic, and its own life cycle, but always exists inside of activity. So We still have to create a main activity. That's going to be the main activity for our app. But now we're going to focus on fragments. And these fragments live inside of the activity. Okay, they live inside of the activity. Think of it as a sub-activity. So you're going to have to create, just like the activity had its own layout, the fragments have their own layout. They have their own logic. They even have their own life cycle, but they are made to exist inside of the activity. Okay, so think of a sub-activity. And so UI fragment, so a UI fragment has a view, it's a visual layout. So remember, user interface fragment, and typically defined by the XML file. So again, just like the activity, you were creating your XML files, you're going to have to create a UA fragment XML file for every fragment that you, well, not every, the type of fragment that you create. So it's either going to be a list or an entry, and I will cover those in more detail. But it's inflated, which means Android reads it as an XML and turns it into a visible user interface elements on the screen. Okay, so pretty much it will behave to the user as if it was an activity, the same idea, but what is happening in the background is different. Okay, so what's actually the logic behind it of how things are behaving in the background is different. To the user, it's going to be like, it's just as an activity, but to us in the background, it's lightweight, it's easier, it's going to pull it out, it's going to be able to replicate as many as you want. Okay. So it offers device adaptability. So tablets have much larger displays than phones, so you can display multiple fragments side by side. So think of it as, I don't know, if you ever on a Mac, or I think normal messages should be too, and you turn your phone sideways and you have, let's say, messages on the side, you can click on any message and you have a list of the messages on one side of the screen, normally the left side of the screen, and on the right side of the screen you have your, like, any of the messages that you clicked is opened up in full display, so you're able to see like the whole chat of any message. And I can show you a sample right now, but pretty much that's what this is telling us to do. So the whole activity in this case would be like the message, right? The messaging app, that's the activity. Now, each individual chat that you have with, whoever you're chatting with, right? That would be a fragment instance, and then you can see it on the side, the full display of that fragment, okay? So those are fragments, so that's why the whole activity would be the messaging, and then each one of these would be fragments. And so modularity and reusability. So fragments help us reuse code and UI components across different activities or layouts. Now, with the activity, we would have to create imagine creating a new activity for every single chat of messages that you would have to, that you wanted to do, right? That would really, really fill up your phone. Like having all of these new activities, for, they're heavy, so every activity for a new chat, right? But rather with fragments, you're able to replicate the same structure format for every single chat. So that's why every single chat looks similar, right? In the same format, where you could, click on it, type in your message, and then add components, the same format, everything. So you don't have to redo the whole thing, a new activity, a new activity, a new activity. Every time somebody wants to start a new chat, we use fragments for those reasons, okay? So fragments allow you to reuse the same view, just reuse it for any new components, and they're very lightweight. So they help you reuse code and UI components across different activities or layouts, and you can embed multiple fragments in one activity. So you can have multiple fragments in one activity and create a multi-pane UI, or reuse the same fragment on different activities as well. So with that, there's a fragment that gives you the list, and there's a fragment that gives you the whole entry on its own. Okay, so this is what I was looking for, okay? So for example, these are different fragments, okay? So this could be a list of all, in this case, all the crimes, right? Or in this case would be our glucose levels as a list. And then when we click on any item in this list, it will open up a detail screen. So this is how it would look on the portrait mode. But if you turn it on the landscape mode, you should be able to see the list and then the details of anyone that you click right next to it. So again, like, if I were to open my messages, just click on one and you'd see the detail of that one message that you clicked. Okay. Oh, so this is an example of swapping out detail fragment. So again, the list of fragments and then the view of detail fragment. So the user presses different lists on the item. So every time you press on a different item here in this list, you will see a different view in the detail fragment. So starting a criminal intent, or starting criminal intent. Okay. So in here, again, this is the startup page of when you open up a criminal intent app. So we have the entry view. So in here, there's a new entry for a new crime. So main activity hosting a crime detail fragment. So how does that happen? Well, remember that you have your main activity, right? And in your main activity, it opens up the criminal detail fragment. So what's going to go into your main activity? If we're going to be use the crime detail fragment to use our logic to do pretty much the hard work for us, right? What's going to go into our main activity? Well, in our main activity, we're pretty much calling in our detail fragment in this case. And once we call in this detail fragment, anytime we press on any of crime detail fragment, anytime we press on any of the entries, it's going to open up the actual crime. Okay, and so we have the activity main XML file, and what this one does, it just pretty much hosts or encloses the crime detail XML file. So this is we're talking about the layouts now, the XML files. So the fragment XML file would pretty much fit inside of the activity XML file. So all you do in here is you leave your main activity blank and you point pretty much to the fragment, detail fragment. And so the activity provides a spot in its view hierarchy where the fragment can place its view, and a fragment is incapable of getting a view on screen itself. Only if it's placed in the activities hierarchy will then the view appear. So how do we create a criminal intent app? And again, exactly following the same idea, older version, but make sure that when you create a new project, you always go with the empty view activity. We created a new project like two assignments, and from assignment 2, so we did one in assignment 1 and assignment 2, and assignment 3 was to build on. So this is, remember, when you create a new assignment, make sure it is empty views activity. If you don't do this, then you're gonna have missing components that you're gonna have to create on your own, and that's more work. Okay. All right, so same idea. For us, it's going to be a glucose monitor, everything how we have been doing it before. Okay, with your own package name, make sure it does say infosec. Now, setting up your project's build, again, you do have to add the build features, so don't forget about that. Just like how we did before, we're going to do it now again. So that we can bind the buttons, so we can bind the text boxes, we can bind everything. We need to make sure that we do the build features view binding true. Okay. And so the other thing that we have to add is in our dependency. So here, like, where is this? This is in the Gradle. Okay, it's in the app/build Gradle. So in Android Studio, it will show us like the app. So the app build Gradle file. Okay, so build the features in the build features, we have to add it manually, and the dependencies. Now, some of these dependencies are added on its own if you just create the fragment. Sometimes it doesn't create it, and if it doesn't, you're gonna have to add it manually, but that's okay. I'm just going to implementation. So for our versions of Android Studio, it's gonna be pretty much implementation, androidx.fragment, and then this, and then the fragment version would be 1.8.9. Okay, so I guess I could actually change that here so it doesn't confuse people. But pretty much here, the version is, if you don't want to call in a variable there, so that would be pretty much. Okay. Yeah, I think it's that one more time. Okay, so let me just fix this. Okay, so there we go. So that's how it should look. So dependencies, inside of the dependencies you have implementation, and then Android X.fragment, fragment, and our version is 1.8.9. Oh, and it's a Kotlin version, so it's this one, not that one. It's this one. Sorry, implementation, this one. Okay, fragment dash KTX, because we're working with Kotlin. All right, so then we have to create a data class. So that was just for the how to begin this project. So first, create your project. Make sure that you go into the build Gradle and add the build features. This one, don't worry about it yet. Worry about it when if it doesn't work after you created the fragment. Okay, so it might create it for you automatically. All right. So so this is the next step, creating a data class. So after you created your application, you're gonna have your main activity. Okay, that's the main activity. You're still gonna use it. So then we have to create a data class. And this data class is pretty much a class to store the data for now. And we're going to talk about, how we're going to work with this data later on in a different project. But for right now, we're just going to create a data class. For us, it's going to be glucose.kotlin file. Okay, so pretty much same thing. You have to import the java .util and then the wildcard here. And you have to specify your data class. So in here we have a unique user interface ID, pretty much, and then adding the details of that. So in our case, it would be pretty much the date, breakfast glucose level, lunch glucose level, and dinner glucose level, and then is it normal or abnormal? Those are the things, okay? So we have to compose a UI by defining the widgets in a layout file. So we still have to do the layout file, but this is going to be a fragment layout file. Then create a class and set its view to the layout that you defined. Wire up the widgets and inflate the layout in the code. You still have to work with your strings XML file. In this case, they had the criminal intent. You have to enter the title of the crime, the title, the details, and whether it was solved or not. Now, this is the layout fragments view. So notice here, now we have, instead of the activity main, or what was the other one, BMI view model, we have the fragment crime XML. Okay, so in this, again, fragment user interface, we pretty much, it works almost exactly like you did before. It's just that now it's called fragment. But pretty much the same idea. You still have the same tools, same buttons, checkbox, text views, edit text, all the same things, exactly the same. Okay, so create it as if you were creating with an activity. It's just your layout, same thing. So this is how it looks, and again, same idea. Okay. Now we have to also create a detail fragment class, and this detail fragment is pretty much your unique, in the list that we had, your unique item. Okay, so for us, it's gonna be it's called the glucose. I call it the glucose entry fragment because we were putting entries, but you call it glucose detail fragment, and in there you create a fragment. So it's gonna be class, and then you're gonna put colon fragment. Okay, like this. But again, it will create it on your own once I show you how to do that. Okay. And so then we have pretty much the same as if you're creating an activity, but now they're called fragments. They're lightweight. It's the idea of what's happening in the background. So in here you get to call in your crime, and this is the entry, right? So for this example, we have the crime, we have the ID, the title, the date, and whether it was solved or not. So you configure the fragment instance in the onCreate bundle, and then you create and configure the fragments view in the another function called the onCreate view layout inflator group bundle. Okay, so this one. Oh wait, so this is where you configure it, and then you're gonna save it right here. Okay, so this is where we do the override function on create view, and this is we're gonna do the layout inflator. So inflator calling inflator layout, then they do container, whether you want to view the group. Then we have to do the binding, and the binding would be fragment crime detail binding. In this case, this is pretty much calling in our fragment XML file that we created for the details. Okay, and then the method is where you inflate the layout for the fragments view and return the inflated view to the host activity. And then the layout inflator and the view group are necessary to inflate the layouts. The bundle will contain data that this method can use to recreate the view from the save state. So wiring up some of the widgets, or wiring up the widgets. So this is again the crime detail fragment, and in here we're binding, and we have to apply the crime title, the date, and whether it's solved or not. But pretty much, so the crime title would be undo a text change. So when the text is changed, go ahead and just pretty much like go ahead and update the text that you're typing in. Okay, and then the date, and then whether it's solved or not. So this one is a unchecked changed listener. So instead of unclick, because I'm not pressing a button, but rather we're checking the box, that's what we use on set unchecked changed listener. So these are listeners. Do on text change, so when the text is changing, and this one when the checkbox is checked. And now defining a container view inside of the activity main XML file. So in here we are, oh sorry, this is, yes, so this is okay. So in this XML file, we are pretty much calling in the Android ID to be the fragment container. So we're adding the fragment container view inside of the XML file. So the main activity is pretty much pulling in the fragment view. So that's the, and so then the fragment container view with ID RID fragment container is used to contain the fragment. So remember, the activity XML file is just a container for the fragment. The fragment is what's going to be displayed, but we still have to declare this in the activity main XML file. And so then hosting a crime fragment with the main activity, remember the main activity, we're still going to use it, but what we're going to be doing is we are pretty much now calling in, well, I guess the same thing, right? Set the main activity, but the main activity itself is pulling in the fragment. Okay, and that's for the XML file. All right, so then we have the crime details view hosted by the main activity. So that's what these were doing, pretty much hosting. So the activity itself is in there, and the activity is pulling the view from the frame, for the fragment, sorry. And so again, activity calls in the fragment manager, and the fragment manager is in charge of displaying the fragment that needs to be displayed. So based on the list, you click on one, the fragment manager is supposed to pull up the one that is supposed to be there. So now moving into the fragment lifecycle, fragments have their own lifecycle and receive their own events, but the fragment lifecycle interacts with the containing activities lifecycle. So when an activity pauses, the fragments are paused. When an activity is destroyed, then the fragments are also destroyed. So some of the fragment lifecycle states are non-existent or destroyed, created, started, and resumed. Very similar to the activity lifecycle. So non-existent or destroyed are where they haven't been created yet or they have been deleted. Then there is the created. From when you create, it goes to onStart and then onResume. OnResume is where the user can see the displayed fragment, and then when the user leaves that fragment, it goes to onPause and then onStop, and then it stays there unless the user goes ahead and pretty much closes the fragment, and then it's destroyed. Just like pretty much the activity lifecycle, but this lifecycle is inside of the activity. And so here are the lifecycle callbacks. On create is the initial creation of the fragment. On start, fragment is visible to the user. On resume is visible to the user and actively running. On pause, the fragment is visible but does not have focus. On stop, the fragment is no longer visible, and on destroy, fragment is no longer in use. On attach, the fragment is first attached to its activity. On create view, the fragment instantiates its user interface view. On activity created, the fragments activity created on fragments view hierarchy are instantiated. And then on destroy view, the view previously created on create view detached from the fragment, and on detach, the fragment no longer is attached to the activity. Now, moving into setting binding null, and this is part of the crime fragment, so it would be glucose fragment. So in here, we're pretty much, doing the on create view, everything's staying the same. But when it comes to the binding, right, we have the fragment XML file being binded using the inflator and the container. And then we have the override function undestroyed. And in here we call the super.undestroyed view, and then binding set it equal to null. So pretty much when you're trying to destroy, just bind it to null. Okay? This is when you're trying to destroy. Just bind it to null. So it removes the stuff. And so to improve crime detail fragment, and here we have, well, we're going to import, pretty much we have a private, where is it? Okay, there we go. A value called binding, of value binding. Sorry, I think this is, okay. Oh yeah, okay, so let me just remove these too many bullets. Makes more sense, okay. So then here we have the private variable binding, and we have a no private val binding is set to get equals check not null, so cannot access binding because it's null. Is this view visible? So this is just pretty much to check and make sure that the view is visible, and this is by checking a null, that it's not null when you're trying to access this binding. All right, so that's it. Oh, so that's it in regards to fragments. Any questions on fragments? Okay, if no questions on fragments, I'm going to talk about assignment 4. So assignment 4, the goal is to build an Android app to monitor a person's blood glucose levels. So we're going to be using fragments for modular UI design, and we're going to be using the recycler view to list historical data. So recycler view, we will talk about it next week on, this is chapter 10 of the book, but we're going to talk about it next week, okay? The sample code for the recycler view is already up there. If you go into week 8, it should be visible to you. You should be able to see the content there. So pretty much, so that's assignment 4. So the app concept is to track daily glucose readings on fasting glucose and then 2-hour post-meal glucose. So first 2 hours before you have any food, that's the first time you check your glucose. And then again 3 times in a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 2 hours after. So 2 hours after your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so it's supposed to display a message based on the glucose level. If it's less than 70 milligrams over, I forgot what DL stands for, then it's considered hypoglycemic. So anything that's less than 70 is considered hypoglycemic. If in the fasting, if it's 70 to 99, it's normal. Otherwise, it's considered abnormal. And anything after eating, if it's higher than 140, then it's considered abnormal. So these are the 3 readings messages that you're supposed to have. So when you calculate it, or when you're entering your data, right, we have like on text edit, or on text change. Hypoglycemic, if you see it's 70, right? Then you see if it's between 70 and 99, it's normal, otherwise it's abnormal. And then after the meal, if it's till 140 to or greater than 140 is considered abnormal, otherwise it's considered normal. So if it, let's say for all these, if it's hypoglycemic, it's considered abnormal. If it's abnormal, or if it's any here, the whole thing is considered abnormal. Even with fasting is within normal, but the post meal is abnormal, then the whole thing is considered abnormal. Okay, the only time when everything's considered normal is if the ranges are between pretty much 70 and 99 in fasting, and right, and it's less than 140 for the post meal. Okay, so these are the two requirements for it to be normal. Pretty much otherwise is abnormal, including if it's hypoglycemic. And so the app structure. So the main activity hosts two fragments. The first fragment is the glucose entry fragment, and this is a user input screen. So first time, entering all the information. Then there's the glucose history list fragment, and the list. This one lists of past readings, so the previous days. Uses a recycler view for efficient scrolling and dynamics list, and a data class called glucose, which stores daily readings. Again, for here, you don't have to use it for this week, but for next week, we'll learn about recycler's view. So fragment 1, that's the entry screen. So the input fields for this is the fasting text, breakfast text, lunch and dinner glucose levels. Then for the buttons, there's going to be 3. There's going to be the date, which displays today's date. It's non-edible, yeah, for now. Then there's the clear, which resets all input fields, and then the history, which opens the history list. Okay. So, and then optional shows an average glucose and abnormal normal status. Now, this history button is not supposed to do anything yet. So, if you want to link it, you can, but you're not required to have it do anything. Okay, but if you can, from what we've learned previously on how to open, from going from one activity to another, if you want to do that, you can. Okay, so just set the on-click listener, and then try to see if you can open the fragment. Now, not required for you now. Okay, I'm able to just go up and then go into like the main activity and change the view so that I could see both the history view and the entry view. So you're not required to make that change yet or make that button work yet. But if you want to take on the challenge, you're more than welcome to. All right, so then the second fragment is the history screen. And this one displays all the stored glucose entries. Each list item shows the date, the average glucose level, the average glucose level, and then the checkbox if abnormal, or checkbox if abnormal or hypoglycemic did exist. And then clicking an item shows a toast with detailed readings for right now. And so the model class, so we talked about, and the other one was like the class crime. And here we have the class called glucose. And this model class, so this is the third file that you need. This class glucose, you have the date in Gregorian calendar time. You have the fasting, breakfast, lunch, and dinner integers values. And some of the example data generation, because you'll see in the assignment, it tells you that you can go ahead and create random data so that it displays for the history. You can do something like this for I from 0 to 99. The glucose, just add a glucose and then calling the random method here. Okay, so date, and then 60 to 100, or so 180, and then random. So just randomize it. Key requirements. Use fragments, not multiple activities. So just one activity, that's the main activity, the rest should be fragments. Use a recycler view for the history. Inputs must be numeric only, so no strings. Show the current day automatically. Display toast for the click list item, and marked abnormal or hypoglycemic days with a checkbox. Best practices. Keep UI logic inside of the fragment. Data logic in the view model. Reuse fragments to support multiple screens, so entry and history. Use the this one you don't have to. This is like a hint if you wanted to use the button, okay? And so avoid direct manipulation fragments from activities, use fragment transitions or navigation components, and that is the best practices. And submission. Submit a zip file. I noticed that some people are having a hard time, so I wanted to add the instructions. So enter studio file and then export to a zip file, okay? And I'll upload the assignment to assignment for Dropbox, and then remember to do that short demo video. 1 or 2 minutes is okay, unless some people think it's long. It's okay. I rather you show me more than show me less. I still have to go in there and check it out. Like I still go through the code. It's just easier for me to say, okay, I know it should be working. I don't have to go through all this troubleshooting, things like that, okay? And so I have the app launch and data entry, clear the button functionality, the history screen with the recycle view list, and the toast message when clicking a list item. Show these things in your video. Okay. Now, let's move on to the actual code, right? The actual Android Studio. There's only like 15 minutes, but that's okay. All right, so, oh yeah, it's an either one. Okay, so we're gonna create a new, oh, that's PowerPoint, okay. We create a new, and we create a new project. Maybe. New project, okay. Make sure it's the empty views activity. You're still gonna do the same thing. Mine was it glucose monitor. Okay. Mine's gonna be 2 because I already created one. So I'm not gonna go through it. I just wanted to show you. But pretty much just do finish. Okay. Where did it go? I think it's this one. So I started working on it as I prepare for class. So these are the things that you're supposed to have. So you're going to have your main activities. It's going to be clear. It's not going to show all this, right? So you have your main activity. And in this main activity, you're pretty much going to call in your, or you could do it from here, setting up pretty much your glucose entry fragment. Okay, so remember, the main activity is pretty much going to be the container for the fragment. When you create this, your main activity is going to be there. Now, I want to talk a little bit, and then in here, right, my main activity, I have the fragment container view. And then I'm just calling in the glucose entry fragment. This is how I do it. So Android name, and I just call it here, glucose entry fragment. And then this will show us, when you first launch the app, this is the display that's going to be showing up. Now, how do we create fragments? I think this is the important thing here. So I'm going to right click here and then go into new, and then there's going to be fragments here. Now, which fragments do we pick? Let's go ahead and pick the blank fragment, and use a blank fragment to do the, I'm going to call it glucose entry fragment. Okay, again, mine is going to show 2 because I already have one here, but this is how I do it, and then just click finish. Okay, and so you're going to just have the fragment there, and again, I'm working on this, so it's going to be there, but you should have the class glucose entry fragment and then fragmented, and it's going to be created out for you. You're going to see other dummy code that's going to be showing up there. You have to change that, but pretty much the same thing, right? You're going to be adding your values. All these are binded. You do have to go into the where is it? Here, and then to make sure the build features binding is equal to true. It might create it automatically for you, but sometimes you're gonna have to just make sure it's there. Okay, don't override it though. All right, so after you did that one, it's gonna automatically create the fragment glucose entry XML button. Again, just go in there, edit it, fix it. This is how mine looks as a code that I see, but this is pretty much just a single entry of the glucose. So then after that is done, I can go ahead and, let me close this one. I created my model class, in this case called data class glucose, and in here I'm putting in the information that I need. Now for the date, I'm creating this variable called date in the Gregorian calendar, and I'm putting 3 things: the year, the month, and the day. The day of the month. Okay. Now, now for the other, so that's one fragment, right? And I'm gonna get ahead of myself right here, and I'll show you how to do this because you still need it. So I'm gonna create new, and then go into fragment, and then on the fragment list, okay? So this fragment list is what we're gonna be used for a history list fragment. And then here our item, in this case, it would be an entry, or I'm gonna call it the glucose because it's a glucose entry. I'm just gonna automatically do the glucose fragment list one, and I'm gonna just call it. I think I called it this list item. Yeah, I call it list item glucose. So the layout names it would be here. Okay. Sorry, no, this is the fragment glucose history list. And then the object content layout, that's the pretty much the list item glucose that I created here. So when you do this list version, it's going to create two XML files. So the actual list and then the item in the list. So, and it's going to create it for you automatically here when you fill in this. So this one is, in this case, the list item glucose. Oops. So that's that one. Okay. And then this one, it was just my glucose history list XML. But then, oh, and the adapter class, I just call it the glucose adapter. Like this. Okay. So that's if you want to get ahead. I mean, you have things to, like work on already, but if you want to get ahead and work a little with that, these are the other things that you'd have to create. And then you just put finish and it'll create it for you. So what that does, it created the history list fragment. And again, this one, I haven't worked on it yet. Okay, it generates it for us, just creates a general, like a general list that it has there. So created for us, you have to change this logic, this code here. But it created this and also created the glucose adapter. Okay, and this glucose, again, glucose adapter, we need to go ahead and change it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the glucose adapter next week. Okay, so those we're going to talk about it next week. And then the other thing, the things I created was a history. And again, this is, I already made changes for the recycler view. And I think that's where I stopped. And this one just creates the item list. Okay, so let's see. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, I think I put it in the same one. It's okay. I have to fix that either way. All right. Any questions? Okay. And so I'm just gonna also talk about criminal intent. I forgot about this, but pretty much again we're following the same thing. So this is similar to what we're doing with the glucose class for us. This is a crime class. We have the detail fragment. In this case, would be our entry one. Then we have the list fragment. We also have to create a view model to hold our list information. Okay, and then that main activity. So this criminal intent is very, very similar. This is from chapter 10. Now this other one that you see here is what's in chapter, I think like 8 or 9. But this is from module 7. It doesn't have much there. It has enough to get you started, but it doesn't have there. So if you look at module 8 code, module 8 code has more information, more code in there that you can base your assignment off of. Okay. All right. So let's stop sharing. Are there any questions? No? Awesome. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'm going to stop the recording now.